All right, so welcome back to the channel. Very first thing that I will say is, considering Western Canada is experiencing a little bit of a heat wave and it might bounce up and down because I'm on a table, is that it is very, very hot and you should be wearing sunscreen. I did not, so I am, as the complexion of sour cream goes, I am very burnt. But anyways, on the wrist, I will do that. Quick wrist check. I'm wearing my vintage 1970s Rado Purple Horse. Awesome watch. I actually ended up buying my girlfriend one of them. And this video actually, live stream, I will do a special brought to you by her because she actually decided to go out for my birthday, an early birthday present, went and bought me this wonderful camera, which means now I get to stream in 1080p instead of 720. So thank you to her, big thanks. And now it's not really ugly and terrible. But anyways, I'm going to take the questions that I got from Instagram first, and I'll answer those ones. And then if you have anything to say, drop it down in the chat bar, and I will answer that ASAP. Anyways, question that I got. First off, I did get a question in regards to just the differences between going with a H22 versus the B series swap. So Sean has been making these kits for a while. Sean, and he's basically the guy who runs One Fun Ride, and he's been making these kits for a while. And the difference really between the B and the H series is, pick your poison. They're both going to be good platforms. They're both will get you the 300 horsepower, no problem. Depends on what really your budget is. Longevity speaking, I would personally go with the B series. The thing is, when I did my swap, when I did my F20B swap, my Prelude, the B series kit was not available, right? So, but if I were to redo that, I would definitely go with the B series now as opposed to the H and F swap. But that's just my opinion. I don't know, it's not that I'm knocking on the H or the F swap. I just think that the B series swap is a better swap overall for longevity. Now, if you just want something, you had 200 horsepower right out of the gate, I would definitely go with your H or F swap. Or if you're not going to, if you're not planning on really boosting it, I would go with an H or F swap. Need water though, but I would probably go that route. There's also, you can say there's cost inhibiting measures. With the H and F swap, you do need to buy a special traction bar for it. So you need to buy the mounts as well as a traction bar. Whereas with the B swap, you don't, right? So there's a couple different things on there. The other big difference is in the current state of the community, the B series engine is a lot more commonplace than the H or F series engine, which is kind of it's kind of problematic for people who really want to go with the Prelude as a, as an overall, vehicle. But I would definitely say that you should be using a, you do your research, right? Figure out what your goals are for the engine, for the car anyways, and then kind of go off of that. That's my personal opinion in regards to that, on which one you should go, if you should go with a B series or you should go with an H or F swap. That's my personal opinion. Now, you could argue whether or not, which one's better. I just think that because, the B series is more plentiful, you're going to get more access to aftermarket parts. It'll just be probably an easier route for you to go down, and probably the more economical route in the long run, considering the abundance of parts still. Okay, so the other question that I was asked very briefly in my, and I did make a video about this, but it was about K-swapping the Prelude. K-swapping the Prelude is not a very common thing. I did make a video about that, and if you have not seen that video, I'd highly suggest you check it out. Here, I'll actually put it in the chat bar. I'll send you a link to it. If you haven't seen it, I would highly suggest checking that out. Just in reasons why I don't really suggest going with a K-swap. Just simply, there's a lot of logistical issues. There's a lot of I would say monetary issues, the biggest thing. And here, if I can very quickly get to this, I will send you that video. I will put it in the description, or not in the description, sorry, in the chat bar for you guys. There we go. If I can, you know what, here we go. And here we go. So you want to take that link, you can go watch that. I did a little bit of a very brief rundown, but basically it kind of boils down to, it's a logistical issue. The K-series engine is a tall engine in a short bay. When the engine was designed, or the car was designed, it was designed more with a very sleek, low hood line, and which therefore makes it very hard to mount a very tall engine, like a tall deck height, in a very short engine bay. So you're either going to have to cut a hole into the hood, or you're basically going to have to drop the car down and have very, very piss poor ground clearance. If you live in a northern Canadian city, such as I do in Edmonton, it's probably not the best route for you to go, as you will bottom out. You'll probably scrape the oil pan off, which is not probably the best route that you want, or the headers. I bottomed out with my F20B swap, and I think I have, I did mention in the video, I believe I have just over 5 inches of ground clearance, which isn't very much if you think about that at stock ride height. So I say, if you want, go ahead, go that route. But if you really care about your ground clearance, you care about ruining a hood line, it's up to you. Don't shoot the messenger. The other thing is just the logistical issues with the monetary as well, as you have to R&D your own mounts. There are no custom mounts for this at this point. And it is just a very, very expensive swap. To this date, and I know this is a little bit of an update based upon what I was previously saying, but to this date that I know of, there is only one person, first of all, in Edmonton that I know of that's been doing this, and he's about $20,000 into this swap. Mind you, he's done other stuff on the car, like body work and stuff like that, but he's about $10,000 or $20,000 into this swap, and it does not, he can't drive it. So in my opinion, if we're both getting about 200 horsepower, whether you go H or F series, I mean, if you go B series, it might be a little bit less, obviously, unless you're doing like a B20 Vtec. And that kind of is about the $5,000 Canadian mark. If you get to 20,000 Canadian for about 200 horsepower of a K20, K20A2 or K20's Z1 or whatever that gets us 210. But you know what I mean, right? So to get to that point and have it for that amount of money, I just don't see it as economically viable or really a good option. And I'm not knocking on the K series. I think the K series is actually a superior platform to the B series, in my personal opinion. But as an economical choice, if we're getting to 300 horsepower is 300 horsepower, regardless of basically really how you made it, right? So in my opinion, I don't believe that we should really, I wouldn't personally dump that amount of money into that chassis, knowing full well that's on the backside where I would have to pay out that amount, right? So in my opinion, I would go with a more economical route that's already tried and proven. Yes, you're not going to have the upside of the tunability in certain aspects or the vast array of parts that come with the K series, but you will be at a greater advantage when it comes to money. You could definitely have your car boosted and be putting out way more horsepower and potentially setting almost records at that point for the price to get your car maybe moving under its own power. And that's my biggest thing, and a part of hacking apart the hood line. So that's what I did cover in that video. I know I didn't really want to make a spiel on this, but that's what I did cover in the video. Link is there if you want to take a look at it. But I did go into great detail about that one. The other thing that I've been asked about is the difference really between an F20B swap and a H22. I know that a lot of importer sites for engines will give you that the F20B swap is a cheaper swap to buy out of the gate. So what I mean by that is the engine, the transmission, and your quote-unquote swap from these vendors will be cheaper. Usually be a few $100s cheaper than your equivalency H22A1 or like your JDM H22A. They will be cheaper. The problem doesn't come off of that. The problem really more or less comes off of it is the fact that the F20B comes out of an Accord SIRT. It does not come out of a Prelude. So the thing is, it's coming out of a different chassis. Now, mind you, there's a lot of similarities, but there are quite a few differences. If you're running OBD1 like I did, there are a lot of different parts and components that basically that eventually work itself into they add up, right? Couple of examples is if you're running OBD1, you won't be able to use the intake manifold from the F20B. The idle air control valve does not work with it. So therefore, you need to have an H22 compatible idle air control valve or an OBD1, which should be an H22A1. So when you factor in the fact that you have to buy an intake manifold, and I mean, maybe you have some wizardry in electronics and wiring and stuff like this, but for the most of us, we're probably not going to get there. And it's not a very well-documented swap. The F20B swap is not a very common swap. There's a reason why not a whole lot of people do it. Is because there are a lot of logistical things in addition to what the typical H-series swap. So when I did it, I personally was like, oh, cool. It doesn't have the FRM sleeves, which is awesome because you can boost it. And then it also comes with the T2, T4 limited slip differential in the transmission. I thought that was amazing. And I thought, oh, it's actually a couple $100s cheaper. Why not get this over to your typical H22? Well, and as I said, you need to buy an intake manifold. The other big thing is the intake manifold, your throttle body, stuff like that. The other big thing would be the power steering, right? So there's no power steering on the Accord SARTs. What you need to do is you need to basically reroute, or not reroute the power steering. You need to get a power steering, assembly and pump and everything from a 4th gen Prelude, like like any of those, and then basically slap it onto the block, take the bracket and everything, and put that on there and route your power steering. Now, if you don't want to run power steering, whatever, okay, sure, whatever. That's a different story. But there are certain things. Also, when it comes to wiring in Vtec, it doesn't have a pressure sensor, so you'll have to wire in one. Or, I mean, you can tune it, so be it, and then get it that way. The other thing that I would say that a lot of people won't probably mention is the fact that when it comes to tuning it, not a whole lot of tuners know how to work with the F20B. There's not a whole lot of base maps available. Now, or at least when I did my swap about, what was it, 5 years ago, I think I did this? Yeah, I did it about 5 years ago. So there weren't a whole lot of tuners who knew about base maps for the F20B, or they were hard to come by. So for instance, my base map that I'm running on my F20B swap that I basically started with was actually a JDM V18C type R map, and that we tweaked for fuel, mostly in the mid-range, and basically we're using an AFR gauge and all that other shenanigans to make sure it would run properly. But we basically tweaked a B18C type R map to make it run the F20B. So rather than actually being able to find an F20B base map, which is just another thing. The other thing is you cannot use a typical H22A1 ECU. You cannot use the ECU usually that comes with it. You're probably going to have to jump it back to OBD1 and all the other shenanigans, which basically would it happen with almost any OBD1 vehicle, right? But you're going to have to be very specific with ECU, and like you're going to have to get a chip P28 and run it that way. Whereas mostly, like if you go for an H22, if it's an OBD1 one, you can just slap in your P13 and call it a day, right? So it's kind of that simple in that aspect. And obviously, if you guys do have any questions, ask them away. I don't have a problem with answering them. But these are just questions that I got from my my Instagram. So I thought I'd answer them first before I really get into anything else. But yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of the differences. I should probably actually make a very detailed video about it going into that. But those are some of the differences between the H22 and the F20B, and why I probably wouldn't necessarily suggest going with an F20B over an H22. The H22 is by far cheaper, more economical, and you're getting at very similar horsepower numbers. And unless you're going to be the person who drops, a turbo kit or other things on this, you're probably going to build your engine anyways. So do as you wish. Another question that I actually no. See, generally speaking, I would answer this question. But at the same time, like I saw it and I'll answer it, but not because I think it's like a good question. I just think it's a useful question for people. That people ask these questions all the time, and they say like I see this a lot. Is that these a lot of no knocks to these younger people. I mean, I was you one day. I mean, I was 16, 17 with a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 to spare, and I bought what I thought was a really cool car. I mean, my first car was a 3rd generation Prelude. So when people ask, is the 3rd generation Prelude a good car? I say yes, but no. It was almost like when I was in high school. This was like when I was 17. I think that was close to nine, almost 10 years ago, a decade ago, right? So was it good then? Yes, sort of. But is it good now? No, not really, because it's just a scarcity of parts. Parts are actually more expensive. The cars are actually rising in value, which is, I guess, good in a sense. But there's issues on that realm and that kind of object where a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, cool. But the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from that is that you're going to have problems keeping this car on the road unless it's in a pristine condition. If it's in pristine condition, it probably will not be in the range of affordable cars for first-time car buyers. So as a first-time car buyer, I can't necessarily recommend it, and I can't necessarily say it's a good idea, even though I love the car to death. And I mean, even it was my first car. And I had issues trying, because generally speaking, especially if you're like really into cars, the people that buy a 1st generation or 3rd generation Preludes right now, not 1st generation, you can't even find one of those anyways. But I mean, the kind of people that buy these cars are not necessarily the kind of people who would be, like literally just, like they're going to be car people for the most part. They're not going to be people who just want to buy a vehicle, right? They're going to be these people who care about the vehicles, and they're going to try, generally speaking, to eventually modify it and have fun with it. But the problem is if they're not willing to put in the work, they're not willing to put in the money, then this car will be suffered in, I would say, a lot of neglect. The same thing is like the Prelude to me is kind of like a very high maintenance dog. That doesn't appear high maintenance. And what I mean by that is that what's going to happen is you're going to go and buy this car and you're thinking, oh, it's going to be $5,000. It's reliable, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it will be reliable. You're not going to have a ton of issues, but there's going to be issues down the road, and you're not going to have the support that you want. You're not going to have a lot of the things you want. It's going to be very difficult for you to do what you want to do, especially with your budget. And that's the biggest thing is a lot of people don't take into consideration budget. They don't want to think about how much things cost, and they just rather just be like, oh, well, maybe I might get this, maybe I might get that. So, I mean, as a car for first-time car buyers, no, I don't honestly think it's the best idea. I think that you should really, be informed about your decisions. I think you should make wise decisions. If you don't mind investing the money into it, go ahead. But if you're thinking it's going to be a $2,000 or $3,000 car, I mean, Canadian, right? And you're just going to run into the ground, have fun with it, beat it around, maybe put on a couple of aftermarket parts on it. It's not going to be that way. And I think that people really need to, discover that it is not that, right? That's my thing, right? It's more of an enthusiast car. It's not just something you beat around it. That's personally my opinion. Okay, so that was that question. The other question that I got, and I need to pull up my phone for this one. Okay, so one person had asked me, let's see if I can find it. Actually, I'll put on this. It's on my phone right now. I have my phone in front of me, which whatever. But let's see if I can get this. And okay, so this guy, which I mean, this is Jeeb. I think I said your name right. I think you're down in Calgary, maybe. Down in Calgary, that place is pretty cool. Even though I used to hate it, I do not hate it that much anymore. So he said basically he wanted to make a list of everything you need with $3,000 budget for an H22. First of all, if you didn't see which video I made about the approximate price of the H22, I'd highly suggest go watching that. However, what I would really say is that prices are approximate. One, right? Prices are approximate. Two, whatever you think it's going to cost you, probably spend more. And I'm not saying that you're spending more because your the parts cost more, everything like that. I'm saying you're going to be spending more because you're going to run into things that you didn't think you had to fix, but you do. So the good example is for instance, when I did my engine swap, which was 5 years ago. Maybe I can make an entire story about it, talking about it. I know I used to tell some of my students in this, oh, hey, buddy, hey, you're in here. Okay. Yeah, so I remember budgeting a certain amount for this swap, and I'd sold my RSX Type S for this swap. And the biggest issue that came into this was just my budgeting, right? So I had about $4,000 to $5,000 to spare. I had imported my engine from Japan. I sent it out to a guy in Regina, who will remain nameless at this point. I don't want to call anybody out, but I mean, the person gets what they deserve. And maybe I will make a video about this, talking about what ended up transpiring. But eventually, I did bring it to him. He was supposed to help me with the swap. He didn't really know what he was doing. That's the best way to describe it. He thought he knew what he was doing, but he did not know what he was doing. Outside of a lot of personal and legal ramifications with what he was, getting himself involved in. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to sit there and nitpick the guy. I mean, he probably did what he thought it was right, even though it was at the time it was illegal and whatever. But yeah, so he thought that he knew what he was doing. Turns out he did not know what he was doing, which in turn cost me a lot of money and caused a lot of heartache. And I mean, there are problems also taking stuff apart. Your suspension components are probably the most likely things to go, especially when you're going to be taking out the lower control arms. Most likely you're going to have to replace bushings. You're going to be taking out ball joints. I'm trying to get axles out and this and that. Most likely you're going to have to be replacing your ball joints. When I did my swap, I actually, in the next couple of years, I mean, my suspension was actually not terrible. I mean, most of my the bushings and the lower control arms all needed to be replaced though. because they were all basically rotted, right? And you're also going to need to, source certain pieces that can in turn make it quite hard for you to complete the swap, because you're going to be relying, like if you, like for instance, if you didn't buy all these things ahead of time, you're going to be sitting with a car in your driveway or your garage for like a couple of days while you try and fast track order this from who knows where. So that's the problem that I ended up with. So my kind of idea is that I don't want people to end up in the same position that I was, where I basically screwed up. And I mean, yes, the car runs. I'm very happy with it. I love the vehicle. But I wouldn't want to see people go down the same route as me, because, it's costly, right? And you don't want to end up doing that. So for people that are, considering this, I would be very, very, very careful about, what you kind of get into, who you trust with your stuff. But I mean, that's a story for another day. But yeah, it's just knowing. I would first of all take care of the suspension. Please take care of your suspension components first. That's the first thing is probably going to go, especially when you try and unloosen those bolts and try and take them out. Your bushings are probably going to be shot. You're probably going to replace those. So make sure you either have your bushings on order already, and then maybe your ball joints, stuff like that. Make sure your suspension's your suspension's in check. Obviously, if the suspension isn't in check, budget a few $100s in regards to just bushings. If you can't do them yourself, you're gonna have to press them in. You're gonna have to do all these other things. Maybe you don't have a press. You're gonna have to take it to a shop, and they're gonna have to do it, which is also quite expensive. So just keep that in mind. You're budgeting not just like the budget isn't just buy the engine, buy the mounts, drop it in the car, or maybe the wiring harness and call it a day. That was my philosophy. That's what I thought, and then maybe budget a couple $100s here and there. That's not what it is. You have to think about all the things. I mean, these cars are not new cars, right? It's not like the bushings aren't worn out. It's not like all these other things aren't worn out. You're basically, what you're doing is, sure, the swap would be perfectly fine if it was just a swap. But the problem is not usually just a swap. The problem is that you're buying these cars, most likely the suspension components are all worn out on them. You're going to have to replace the suspension components. And who knows? I mean, at least my car didn't have to deal with any frayed wires or anything like that. Your wiring could be shot too. Who knows? That's my big thing, right? So when it comes down to that, make sure that you know exactly what is really like worn out on your car. Go through it. Take a good look underneath your vehicle and know which suspension components will probably need to be replaced, even before you start tearing it apart. Because the last thing you want to do is get partway through the swap. You can't drive your car, especially if it's your daily driver, which I made a whole other video about that, is that you don't, make sure you know what's going on before you start this. It's a big task. It's not easy for anybody. Also, make sure you know, if you're doing the, what kind of route you're taking for wiring. If you're going OBD1, how you're jumpering it back, stuff like that. Just make sure you know what's going on. I always think of it as more of a budgeting thing, right? Be financially smart about what's going on. Don't screw yourself over just to get a couple extra horsepower. Be smart about it, and don't kind of go all over the board. Make sure you have a very, very concise, I would say, a concise list of what you know. So make sure you climb under there, look at what's need to be replaced. Make sure you have a solid checklist on things that need to be replaced, especially within your suspension components, before you even start tearing stuff apart. After you've done that, after you've decided, you're like, yep, my suspension components, I know it needs to be torn apart. Make sure that the engine that you're taking, make sure you do a compression test on it. Make sure that, let's say the timing belt's not in the best shape. Make sure you have all these little maintenance things that you could do before you drop the engine in the car, because then your life's easier. It's cheaper. Well, cheaper in the long run, not necessarily maybe cheaper. Outside of inflation or whatever, but it will take you a lot less time to do it, rather than if you try and do it in the long haul. You have to do it twice, right? And doing a timing belt on an engine, on an engine when the engine's out of the vehicle is a lot faster than doing it on the engine when it's in it. If you want to save yourself the time, save yourself the luxury, all these other things. But do that. Don't waste your time on, I would say, quote unquote, don't just cut corners. That's the biggest thing. If you can learn anything from a swap, don't cut corners. Do not cut corners. It's only going to end up hurting in the long run. So make sure you cover your bases. Make sure you get all the stuff that you think will be problematic. I know that, for instance, with the with any of your H or F series, they use a auto tensioner for the timing belt. If you want a manual one, go and buy a manual one. I think KS Tuning sells one, or it's been a while. K-Tuned, I think, sells one. KS Tuning, K-Tuned, something like that. But make sure you buy one if you want that route, or if you want to use another auto tensioner, although sometimes they fail if you try and use the same one, and there was a problem with them. So make sure you know exactly what could potentially go wrong down the road, so then you can do all this stuff ahead of time. Did I do that? Some stuff I did, some stuff I didn't, because I was just trying to get it done as cheap as possible, which I basically state, don't do what I did. Otherwise, it'll end up, hurting you long term. It's going to be more of a hassle doing it long term than just doing it like trying to bypass it, save a few bucks today. It's going to be more of a hassle tomorrow when you try and do that. That's what I'm getting. The other thing, once you have covered the basics, make sure that you know how you're going to be wiring this car up. Are you going to be jumping back to OBD1? Are you going to try to do it OBD2? Make sure you know the wiring. One Fun Ride has a great video, or not video. He's a great resource. You can bug the guy any damn and so you can buy his products. I'm not paid by him. Heck, I would love to be sponsored by him, but I'm not. But go check his stuff out. He's a great resource. Go look on the forums, Prelude Power, stuff like that. Just search it up, H22 swap. It's documented over and over. The information hasn't really changed. Now, I would also consult your local tuner. Consult the guy that you're going to be bringing in, chipping your ECU and figuring out what's going down, right? Like if you're doing, let's say you decide to buy a header intake, and you're putting an exhaust system on it, you're doing maybe something else, right? It's kind of bolt-ons, right? At that point, probably best idea is to find a base map that can run the bolt-ons, right? You don't want to hamstring yourself and sell yourself short. So do it right the first time. Figure out a base tune and then, modify it a little bit, or, like a tune with a tune for this, but talk to your local tuner, figure out what they're going to charge you, and then build that into the price, along with the import cost of the engine and transmission and mounts, right? Mounts are another thing. I've talked about this before. Make sure you buy your mounts either from One Fun Ride. ESP is decent as well. Those are the ones that I'm running. I would have gone with One Fun Ride. There was a group buy, and one of the guys that convinced me to buy them. Now, a lot of people have had issues with ESP for other products. I have not had issues with them. With the third generation Prelude products that I've purchased, they've always been good. There was decent customer service. I will not complain on that, but I know that some people have had issues and that they're kind of, the company may or may not be the best one to deal with. So that's that. I say my experience with them has been perfectly fine. But for peace of mind, just go buy them from One Fun Ride. That's the way to go. That's perfectly fine. The other thing that I would say, please, for the love of everything good, do not buy innovative mounts. Innovative mounts they used basically, I would believe it was either a twisted chassis or a chassis that just when they basically fabricated the mounts, they do not line up. So you'll buy them, you'll try and mount your engine. They don't line up very well. It's going to be a bit of a hassle for you. Okay, so don't go that route. Save yourself the pain, the trouble. I know obviously it's been a little bit of a silent, it's been silent on the chat bar, which doesn't bother me because there were actually quite a few questions that I got asked. But if there is anything you want, drop a comment just down in there and I'll get to that ASAP. So the other thing that a lot of people seem to ask, or that I get asked kind of on a daily basis with my Prelude, is sorry, I should bring it up from this. Is that they ask me, should I invest in the Bastard B engine? And so I would say yes, but no. There are some people like Steve on the forum. He's going to die by it. In the Facebook groups, he's going to die by it. He's going to swear by it. He's a tuner. He's a great guy. Don't have any issues with him. But would I take his side on things? Maybe, maybe not. I personally think the H and the F series is a better platform. Although I will say, and the reason why I do say this in the B series, the later B series, and the reason why I say this is just because longevity of the platform. The Bastard B is a very finite motor with a very finite window for parts and everything like that and availability. Yes, you can fabricate things, yes, you can do certain things, but it's going to be infinitely more expensive down the road in the long run than if you go with these other options. So that's just my opinion. I take it as such. I mean, disclaimer, hey, you know, it's your money. You do whatever the heck you want with it. I don't care, right? So, but that's kind of enough of that. The other thing that I was really asked, I wanted to, there was a Prelude that was posted in Calgary, and one of the guys, he had asked me to just kind of talk about this a little bit and show basically one of these cars and see what was going on with it. From the pictures, I am going to say that, I don't know, like, okay, here. There is a bit of rust I can see down here. But what I would say with this, the big one, what I would say, the rust, okay, first of all, your taillight being broken, that's going to be a bit of a hard thing to find. So you say, okay, actually, you're right in here right now. Here's a good thing. Is it easy? So Najiba E asks, is it easy to find a parts car in Alberta? So I'm in Alberta as well. I believe you're in Calgary, correct? You in Calgary? Yes, no, maybe so. I think you are. I mean, otherwise the listing you sent me, it would not be, I don't know if it's in Calgary or what. Is it easy to find parts car in Alberta? Not necessarily. They used to be more plentiful about 5 years ago, okay? I've had a few parts cars. I haven't had one in a while. That comes down to 1, rarity, 2, space, right? There's simply, I don't have space for them, and I don't want to be lugging around a bunch of extra parts. I do still have I think I still have like 2 bins, like 2 of those big Rubbermaid bins full of parts. But most of the time, parts cars in general are a bit harder to come by. And especially when it comes to, like, you know, pick and pull. Pick and pull is virtually useless, although you can check back with them every now and then. Most of the time, what these cars are coming into are not usually in the best of condition when they're landing in pick and pull. Usually they're pretty piss poor condition. Sometimes you can get useful stuff on them, sometimes not. Your best bet would be to be going to some of the forums and looking, or, you know, checking classifieds, Kijiji. Auto Trader is not really useful here, but mostly Kijiji. There are people who will probably sell certain things. But yeah, so parts cars are somewhat difficult to acquire, just simply because there's not very many of these cars left on the road, right? If there were hundreds of thousands of them left on the road, this wouldn't be an issue, but there's not that many of them. So parts cars can generally tend to be a little bit harder to come by, especially for body parts, you know, panels or whatever. Interior parts are another thing. But yeah, so this car, I noticed, and I'll put this up to the camera right here. This car has a broken taillight. So broken taillights, and taillights in general, a little bit hard to come by. So I would, like, in my personal opinion, your taillights are probably about $150 to $200 Canadian. I mean, I don't know if there's a company that really sells these aftermarket taillights. I might have a spare one if you want to bug me. I might have one. I'm not 100% certain. I can go look. Another thing that I would note, this hood has a lot of rust in the front, and it looks like a lot of paint fade. Okay, so I don't know if you care about the, you know, the rust, the paint fade, and all that other stuff. But it is something to consider. The other thing I would notice, you look in the very front of this, fog light's broken. These fog lights, generally speaking, if you want a OEM one, you're going to be looking at about $150 for the pair of them, and that they're working or not. I actually retrofitted a pair of, like, Canadian Tire lights to work with that, and I think I paid maybe $30-40 for that, and that was perfectly fine. The other thing that I'm saying, okay, so it's got 190,000 kilometers. It runs, just has some problems. Was going to use it as a project car, but don't have the time, and will be a great use for a parts or as a project. So this guy, the guy is selling it. That this ad that I'm reading off of, you asked me to critique this ad. The guy is selling it as a parts car or as a project car. So in my personal opinion with this, is he asking a fair price? $800 for a Prelude that it starts and runs. Okay, like I guess, like, but my biggest thing is the guy hasn't told. First of all, he has no interior shots, which is whatever. But I mean, he also is. Okay, what? I can't tell what this is. That's not an SI, is it? Because it's not SR. Sorry, not SI. SI is the States. Okay, okay. Oh, it's also an auto. I didn't see that. It's okay. It's an S. I would honestly. Are you looking for a clean chassis, like, or are you looking for something to build off? Because you'd have to auto to manual swap it if you care about it. The auto, I've had one with the transmission, like the auto transmission. It's whatever. I mean, it was my first car, so. But all my other ones, I've had 5 of these cars, and all but one of them, my very first one, was a manual transmission. So. The other thing is none of the manual transmissions from any of the other engines are going to fit unless it comes from the bastard B series. Okay, so clean chassis, look, an H22 swap budget is $5K all in. Okay, the chassis itself doesn't look that clean, to be honest. You're going to need to spend at least, and I don't know who your bodywork guy is, who does your bodywork, but you're going to be spending a pretty coin on bodywork. I mean, my car is by no means perfect. It's pretty poopy in my opinion. But an H22 swap, if you budget your money correctly, if you source a lot of local parts, is definitely doable. Would I do it in an S chassis? I don't know. I would personally try to find an SR chassis just because the amenities like, power windows and stuff like that, I personally like. If you don't care about that, it doesn't matter. So long as the body's perfectly clean, so long as you can get it, as rust-free as possible, that's where I would be looking at. Honestly, in my opinion, after driving an F20B swap Prelude for 5 years now, mind you, I only drive it in the summer. It's the car that I drive in the summer. In the winter, I drive something else. It's varied. It's been... Oh, the difference between the S and the SR. Okay, so the SR is the... Okay, so the SR... Oh, actually, no, I should mention this. A good point to mention. So the SR and the S model was came with the B20A5. So that would the S model from 88, 89 came with a B20A3 carb motor. The SR, like the SI, quote unquote, for the States, came with the B20A5. In 1990 and 91, they switched it, they updated, they did the facelift, blah, 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 all that other shenanigans, and they made it so that it was they instead took the B21A1, which is the engine that we all love or not love, I would say mostly hate it. We think it's a piece of crap because it's the FRM sleeves, right? The fiber reinforced sleeves. And so those ones are about 140 horsepower, I think 135 pound-feet torque, I don't know, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But those ones, the B21A1s, those ones, the 9091 SR ones are the only ones that are equipped with OBD1. ECUs and are running in OBD1 software, like your wiring systems. All the other ones are OBD0. So to make your life a lot easier, you want an OBD1 chassis, which means you're going to be looking for an SR model. Also, the amenities are, I would say, vastly superior in the sense that you're going to be getting, power windows, right? And like, obviously you have the bigger amenities was the fact you get something like 4-wheel steering, be an SR 4-wheel steering model, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest difference for you as someone who doesn't give a crap and just wants to swap it out is you're getting power windows and the fact that your chassis is running on OBD1 with the engine that's, a more quote unquote more powerful engine, but you don't care about that. The biggest thing is that it's OBD1, not OBD0, so you don't have to try and jump everything up to OBD1, right? And try and wire it in all that way because your car is OBD0, whereas the SR is OBD1. But other than that, interior options. Also interior. Sorry, I forgot to mention this. The SR model has the fully adjustable driver's seat. So the driver's seat, you can actually adjust the, so that's why you sold your 90, the 90 Prelude and the S. Yeah, so the SR has the adjustable seats, so your side bolsters can actually adjust in and out. You have the adjustable lumbar support. You have a micro adjustment for the tilt, as well as you have a memory button. So if you move the seat out, like you tilt it forward or back to put something in the back seats, it'll actually snap back to that original position that you put in as a memory function. So there's like a multiplicity of things on the driver's seat. The passenger seat doesn't have these things, but the driver's seat has a lot of very specific things to make it more comfortable for a driver, whereas the S model does not have that. So the SR has a bunch of these little features with the driver's seat. That's just something that, sorry. I mean, obviously I have to remember this all off the top of my head, so I feel like I almost have to be an encyclopedia. But yeah. So I would personally go with an SR if I have the choice or chance to get one. The SI, the SI is the equivalency of a Canadian SR. So the SR is the Canadian SI. We didn't have an SI sold in Canada. We only had the SR. But they basically are virtually identical outside of a badge. So that's kind of on that measure. I don't know if you have any other questions in regards to just like the differences between the S and the SR, but those are some of the major differences. I'm trying to think if there is anything else that I can possibly think of at the moment. It'll probably escape me, or it is escaping me. Oh yeah, no problem, anytime. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that comes at a difference between the S and the SR, right? Is that your fully adjustable driver's seat, and the engine option with it being OBD1, which makes swapping and stuff a lot easier. What motor's in the Prelude, the 90 Prelude S? No, it'd be a B20A5. So the B20A3 is the carbureted version, which was only sold in North America, or at least in Canada and the United States, in 88 and 89. And that's a carb model, and those are like 105 horsepower, something like that. So every other model is fuel injected, and so the 90 and 91 Prelude S's are all going to be B20A5 engines, which is a perfectly fine engine. In fact, honestly, if I had my choice between the B20A5 and the B21A1, I would pick the B20A5, even though it's just like, it's slightly not as powerful of an engine, doesn't have the same horsepower and torque numbers, but longevity speaking, it's a better engine. Can you turbo it? You're asking, okay, are you like the B23 or the B20A5 or the B21A1? Oh, yeah, you can turbo the B20A5. So there is definitely a route you can turbo. The best person to talk to in regards to boosted Bastard B engines would be Steve on any of the Prelude groups, right? Facebook groups. So Steve's a great guy. He can show you the ropes right now. I think he used to be a tuner. Great guy. He'll defend the Bastard B engine every single inch of his life. Super awesome dude. He knows his way around that motor. He's a great guy. But can you turbo it? Yes, you can. Cost inhibitive? Yes. You're going to be looking at about the same amount of money to turbo it as you will be to be swapping into an H22. The only thing with turboing, and the reason why I didn't go turbo with my car was, one, you're going to be stuck finding, you have to make, well, you have to make it, but you're going to be stuck finding a manifold, right? You have to find a manifold. Now, at the time when I was looking, and this was 5 years ago, mind you, stuff has changed, but generally speaking, on rare cars that don't have the aftermarket support, it probably is never going to get better. It's probably actually going to get worse for aftermarket support. So I was looking at you had to buy a manifold, and these were basically, they were almost made to order at this point, but there are not very many companies who support the B20A5 and make turbo manifolds for them. So there's no kit that you can just buy off the shelf, whereas like, you could buy a big kit for like a B series, right? There's no kit for it. So you literally have to piece everything together yourself, which makes it very cost prohibitive in the sense of like, you're just going to be paying a lot to get whatever you want. And I mean, the other thing is like the last time I checked, now Steve could correct me if he wants, he could jump in there and, you know, bash me over the head, but I'm not. It's going to be very difficult for you to be finding forged internals, if I remember correctly. You can use, I mean, I think Eagle still makes them, but Eagle is pretty expensive. Now, and I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I go search it up. I don't mind being called out. I mean, it's been a long time since I've looked into it. The reason why is because it just didn't interest me for the price point that it was going. I just couldn't really be bothered. But yeah, so yes, you can turbo the B28.5. Your horsepower numbers, you can make upwards 300 horsepower pretty easily. Not really too much of an issue. When it comes to reliability, I mean, any boosted Civic on their, you know, I mean, not boosted Civic, but any boosted Honda on stock internals can be a bit of a gamble, right? Anybody knows this. You roll with the punches. You kind of do whatever you want, right? So when it comes down to that, it's just pick your poison, really. If you want to go that route, if you want to piece together a turbo kit, if you want all that, then there's no problem with that. However, if you don't want to go that route and you're more interested in, I wouldn't say the more economical route, because they're both not economical. Realistically, this car is not an economical car at all. It is. It simply is not. It just isn't. It isn't an economical car. That's the biggest problem with it. From a long-term standpoint. But yeah, I would definitely go in and yes, you can turbo it. Yes, it's going to cost you money. Yes, you will have to do a lot of research. You'll have to figure out where you can get a custom manifold from. You're going to piece together a turbo kit. You're going to have to figure out what ECU and everything you're going to run, who can tune it, because remind you, the B25 runs on OBD0. Most tuners are going to try and do to OBD1, so you're going to have to jump from OBD0 to OBD1. You're going to have to figure that out. So there are a lot of logistical things you're going to have to solve in order to get that turbo to run. Now, realistically, I mean, like for the same price, yeah, you could probably do it for a similar price to you doing an H series swap. So, and I mean, it just pick your poison. That's my thing. I don't know. Like I personally would go with an HRF series or a B series, like the Sean has the mounts for. That is my personal opinion. That's probably where I would go long term, just because you can find more parts. And they're easier to find, especially, you know, Civics and stuff, you know, they're still plentiful. Whereas, you know, even Preludes nowadays are pretty rare. But yet we have to remember that most of these 90s cars now, they're over 20 years old. It's kind of hard to think. Yeah. So good. That's personally my opinion. I don't want to be the guy who kind of like craps on the dream and says, hey, you should do something because it's this way. I don't want to be the person who tells you to do something just because like it's quote unquote the better way. I personally want to help people. That's my philosophy. I don't have any skin in the game. I'm not making any money from it. So in my opinion, even if I was making money from it, I would still want the most economical route to get the best outcome possible. It's the same thing when I sell watches. I want the yeah. Well, thank you. I do appreciate trying to be logical, but it's the same thing when I sell watches. I try and get my clients the best possible outcome for the least, like, you know, cost, right? I'm not going to be just trying to jack up the price until buy all this crap and buy all this stuff when it isn't the best option for the person, right? Especially if you're working with a certain budget. If you're working with a limited budget, you have to figure out, well, you have to kind of add things up and figure out, is the budget going to work? And always don't do what I did, but always try and, you know, go over budget by, like, not going to go over budget, but like budget a little bit more than what you think it'll cost, because the last thing you want to do is be screwed over and you know, you're out of car where your car can't run, and then all of a sudden you're still in the hole and you have to pay a bunch of money to try and get that. So like that's what happened to me, right? And I had to work on the car for about a month and a half. I had to ride my bike back and forth to my summer job when I was in university, which was, I guess to me it was a very humbling experience. I had to actually borrow about $1,500 from my parents, which in my entire life at that point I'd never asked to borrow money. And to me it was a very humbling experience, and I realized that yes, it is possible to make mistakes and you know, kind of screw up. And I mean, I thank my parents a lot, and I think that, you know, if it weren't for them, I wouldn't have been able to kind of bail out, and they bailed me out on a bad decision that I made that my dad especially originally told me not to do that. I said not to do it that way, and I screwed up. I did it anyways, and turns out he was right. And I mean, ironically, it's like when you get older, you realize that your parents are actually right in a lot of things, and you were the wrong one. And I mean, I'd hate to admit it as a teacher, right? I mean, a lot of kids are like, our parents don't know anything. I'm like, actually, your parents are probably pretty smart people. I mean, some parents are really stupid. I mean, I've had to deal with them, but generally speaking, parents do know usually, and they just are trying to look out for the best with their kids, right? So with your aspect, which way you want to go, it's really up to you. It's really how you want to spend your money. That's at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? How you spend your money, and if you're happy with it. I mean, there's people who do ridiculously stupid things to cars, and if that's what you want to do, go ahead. Like there's people, especially, I mean, I'm going to relate it to watches because that's what I do, right? I mean, I'm a teacher, and then I'm a broker for watches, right? So people are going to want really stupid stuff. People are going to want things that just don't make sense. And the thing isn't that I can't sit there and berate them and call them out and tell them that they're stupid all the time. I literally will have to tell them. I'll be like, you know what? It's your own money. Go do whatever you want. But I mean, I will always be there for the people that ask questions. If they want to learn, I'm always willing to teach. If they want to learn, I'll always tell them. I'll give my opinion. Well, that's just me. That's kind of how I operate. And I mean, some people just want to be told what to do, and they want a product sold to them. I'm not really that person. I want to know what the customer wants. I want to know what the client wants. I want to know what your friends want, because then I can figure out, hey, I mean, maybe it might not be what I agree with, but maybe it might not be the best way, but at least, we can come to a consensus, and I can give you the best information to move forward with that. So it's like when people ask for my opinion, then I'll give my opinion. When people ask for other stuff, then hey, it is there. But yeah, you can turbo the B28.5, great engine, great platform. You can make power with it, decent power. But over the long run, I think you're gonna be better off with a H series swap or H or F series swap, or if you want to go with the new mounts that Sean has on his website. And you know what? Here, I'll throw that down in there too, because that's it's useful. If I can talk. And Sean is a fantastic dude, or at least I think he's an awesome guy. So, and he will get back to you probably ASAP. There you go. So if you want to go check out his stuff there, it's all there. I will go. I mean, on record, I'll go and say, what motor do the mounts support? Okay. So, that's another thing I forgot to say. With the F20B, you need a different driver's side mount because the Accord and the Prelude are slightly different. So that's just besides the point. What motor do the mounts support? Any of your, obviously with the H and F swap, you're going to be looking at something like an F23 from the Accords. You could look at the H22 or the H23s, stuff like that. The F20B, however, as I did say, the driver's side mount is slightly different, so you'll need to get that off of a Prelude for it to operate properly. Yes, that is what I did. I know that I had that issue, so I had to go grab it. Sorry, it's bouncing up and down. I should find a better way to mount the camera, but I have not. So I have it literally just dangling on the top of my laptop where the other camera would be, but I love this camera. So my girlfriend did me a solid and got me a good one. So thank you for that early birthday present again. And she's at work, so she can't even watch this. Not that she would. She'd probably get really bored about 10 minutes in. That's what she does. She literally is like, I watched your video, meaning I put it on and just left the room. And I'm like, I guess it helps the analytics. So you do what you want. But what motor do the mounts support? Any of your H or F series, but your typical things. I'm not talking about the F20C that's in the S2000, but you're going to need with the F series, because they're an Accord, they come out of an Accord. You're going to need that different driver's side mount, which is what I need with the F20B. Because it came out of the Accord, not a Prelude. The B series mounts that Sean has will be supporting not the Bastard B. He has mounts for the Bastard B, which are basically just more like racing mounts, or replacement mounts, whatever. But they specifically focus on you're going to be looking at B16, B18, and your B20, right? So, and with B20, I mean like the CRV engines, right? So those are the guys you can swap in, and you can plug in, like, play around with them however you want. You want to do an all-motor B20 Vtec, you want to do an LS Vtec, you want to do some turbo B18 C1 from a GSR, drop it in. Just get all the necessary hardware. The one thing that I will say is you do not need to buy a front traction bar with the mounts. So the mounts themselves are more expensive for the B series swap, but you don't have to buy an additional traction bar. Whereas with the H&F series, you have to buy an additional traction bar. So I believe the mounts, if I remember correctly, I'm on his website right now. Let's go, products. Okay. Huh, interesting. I didn't know he made a NSX swap. That's not important right now. Okay, so here's the thing. Prelude B-Series swap. You are looking at $792 plus $35 for the shipping and pay, okay, blah, 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 stuff like that. So that's for the B-Series swap, right? Now, the H22 swap is $548. Now, obviously, that's a $200-something difference. The problem is if you're buying the HRF series swap, you have to buy a traction bar. The traction bar is $726, okay? So you need both the traction bar and the mounts, okay? Whereas with the B series swap, you do not need the traction bar. So the mounts are more expensive, but you don't need to buy that almost $800 US traction bar, okay? So those are that's just something a little bit different, right? And yeah, there's that. Now, I think let me just check to see if I had any more questions. And before I move on to hockey, because I know that some people actually want to hear about hockey. So considering the game one is tomorrow, the Stanley Cup playoffs, which I am very excited for. What card does so Najib, you asked, what card does a B Series Vtec come from? The B Series Vtecs, you get the B17. Yeah. The traction bar isn't needed on your B Series Vtec ones. And I mean, you could talk to Sean about that a little bit more. Go bug him. He's an awesome guy. He'll answer any questions you got. And just, I mean, you could probably add him on Facebook if you really want to. I don't know if he's going to get angry at me for saying that, but I will. But yeah, so the B Series Vtec comes out of the Acura Integra GSR, like the 9093, the GSR. So the DA kind of, I mean, I'm even messing around with the chassis codes because I'm not, like, I don't memorize all these things. It's just from using them or learning them. So you 1993 Civic, the GSR. So it's the B17. You're not going to really see a whole lot of those. If you want to get one, go ahead. If you don't, Bob's your uncle. The B16, you can look at the B16A2, which comes from the 99-2000 Honda Civic SIR. And those are from the EM1 chassis. So those are the B series. The other thing is from the Integras. So you have the B18, the B18A motors, which are from the 90 to 93, and those are in the base model Integras. And then you have the B18B motors, which are found in, and those are the non-VTEC ones, and they're found in the 94 to 01 Integras, and those are the cheaper ones. You can boost them, but yeah, you can get those for pretty cheap. And so those ones are found in the 90-93, or sorry, 94 to 01. Usually they're the B18B1. So then you can, so then there's the B18C1, which was found in the Integra GSR, and there's the B18C5, which is found in the Integra Type R, which is actually more expensive. Usually B series motors are going to be more expensive if you import them. However, if you don't import them, if you buy them locally, usually they're going to be cheaper than importing an H or an F series swap because they're obviously more plentiful and there's more of them out there. But yeah, there's that. There's also the what am I thinking? There's the B20, which comes in the CRV, not a VTEC engine, but there's the B20B2, which is in the 98 to 2000 or 98 to 99 or something like that. no, 97 and 90, 97, 98. And then they switched in 99 to 01 with a B20Z2. So it bumped up by 20 horsepower to, I think, 146 horsepower. My brother had the B20 V2, and we called it the green machine. It was slow as all. Like, oh my goodness, that thing was slow. Then he got the one with the B20Z2, which was a 20 horsepower. I'm going to tell you, I've never felt a bigger difference, 20 horsepower in a car, in that car. In night and day difference for how it felt. But yeah, so those are the engines that the cars that the B series engines come out of. So your Civic, your Integra, and the CRV. Those are the ones you're going to be looking for. Is a B20 Z2 swap worth it? It depends on what it's coming from, right? So from your from your perspective and your platform right now, you are not going to be getting that much of a gain in power from the Bastard B unless you do a B20 Vtec or you turbo it, right? These are just more like longevity and ease of access of parts to do it this way, right? But you're like, as I would say, like, is it worth it? If you have a B20A5 and you switch to a B20 Z2, you're gaining 10 horsepower. That's about it. It's a lot of work for 10 horsepower. A lot of work and a lot of money. The problem is that the B20 A5 is not going to build any power, so it just doesn't. The only way you can really build power is by boosting it. So there's that aspect. The B20 Z2, okay, plus a turbo. Yeah, is it worth it if you're doing a turbo? For sure, definitely. It depends on obviously your budget, right? But if you're going to be if it's not going to be a turbo, if you're not going to be putting parts into it, you just want to drop it in as like a replacement motor, I guess it's worth it, but it's really expensive at that point. The biggest issue is that the B20A5 engines are now becoming pretty scarce, right? And the thing is, if you're buying an SR car, the SR comes standard with a B21A1, which is the FRM. I call it the piston ring eating muncher. So it just munches on piston rings, and that's your problem right there, right? So your biggest issue when it comes to that is that when it has you're eventually going to start burning and consuming a lot of oil. I remember when mine was I ran one and that consumed a butt ton of oil, right? And I mean like a ridiculous amount. I was burning about a liter every probably about 1,000 kilometers. Actually, no. It was actually way less than that. It's about a liter every 500 kilometers. Basically, every time I filled up my gas tank, I'd have to put in about a liter of oil. Yeah, because it was that bad. They just chew through their piston rings, B21A1s. So from a reliability standpoint, it's definitely an upgrade. But also that engine, it was running on 3 cylinders when I bought it, and that thing was a piece of junk. The B21A1. I wouldn't very bad. Ironically, I drove it for an entire summer like that. Ironically, that's what I did. But eventually, the timing belt broke on it. That's how the engine ended, because I was driving out to get it swapped, and then it broke on me. So I had to get it towed to where I was getting the engine swap, which was a whole other story. But yeah, like overall, is it an upgrade? Yeah, definitely worth it. Or is it a huge power upgrade? No, unless you turbo it. Is it a good idea? Yes, definitely a good idea. I would personally recommend it. If you're, obviously, if you have the spare capital to do it. If you're just going to run it just as just your cheap kind of weekend car or whatever, and you spend money on other things, let's see your investments, or let's see your house, your rent, or all these other expenses, take care of that stuff first. Don't just go play. That's just my opinion. Obviously we all want to play, but if you need food on the table, probably not the best idea to play. Just my opinion. But yeah, I would definitely say it's worth it. The B series Vtec engines can be a little bit more expensive, obviously, just because people love them so much and they're so tunable. But if you have any other questions, shoot them in the chat bar and I'll answer them in regards to the Prelude. If not, I'll probably give it maybe about a minute or so, and then I'll switch over to hockey, and I'll probably talk about that for about 10-ish minutes and probably wrap her up there, because I'm out of water, and if I talk too long, then my throat, obviously, vocal cords get strained. But also, when is my next live session? Okay, so generally speaking, all my live sessions will be on Sunday afternoon. That's kind of when I put it. Usually I'll be usually they're in between about 3 to 4-ish. I mean, I had to bump this one back. I was trying to set up the camera, and I mean, obviously my girlfriend got me the new camera and all this other stuff. So I had to figure out. I was going to try and mess around with it, but then I eventually just kind of settled on trying to make it work in the way that the current configuration. So yeah, but generally speaking, they're usually at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's when the live streams are. Usually they're about 30 minutes. This one's been running for about an hour and 5 minutes, which is great because I guess a lot of content. But yeah, it's usually they're about 30 to 40 minutes. That's kind of where I like to. So I personally think it's a sweet spot. But yeah, that's when they are every Sunday. Cool. But anyways, yeah, if you do have any questions, obviously my Instagram ba4_Massey, you have it. You can fire me off questions, and I don't mind answering them. Now that school is over and I'm out and I'm not teaching anymore, the summer is a little bit more free. I will be focusing more on my watches, though, which means that it'll probably be a little bit more watch content on here. And then also when it comes to selling, because I do run the company, right? So there'll be a lot of stuff on that. But anyways, yeah, no, thank you for tuning in. That's great, awesome. But I'll probably switch over to talking a little bit about hockey. So I guess in that vein, we'll switch it over. I mean, obviously, if you're tuning in about the 1 hour and 6 minute mark, we're talking about hockey now. I'm actually really excited for hockey. I understand that it is a super awesome thing. Obviously, if you're in Canada, hockey is, I would say, our lifeline. And my team that I was originally cheering for did not make the playoffs because they sucked. That's the Detroit Red Wings. I am a huge fan of Steve Yzerman, and obviously me being a BC boy because I was born in beautiful British Columbia. So those people represent, even if we don't like all the high taxes and all the other garbage, and we think that Vancouver's full of crazy cuckoos on city council. If you actually heard, now they want to start charging you to park your car on the street. Crazy place these are. But luckily I don't live there. I live in Alberta, which is basically the Texas of Canada. So thank you. I would probably prefer to live here. Because there's less crazies, the tree-hugging hippies down there. Not that I don't mind trees, but a little crazy down there. Anyways, so now, Detroit, they suck. Let's be real. They suck. So who did make the playoffs? Obviously, the other 16 teams. I was really, really, really rooting for Oilers because obviously I do live in Edmonton. I was happy about that, but just did not happen, unfortunately. And obviously, if you have any hockey-related content, just drop in the chat bar and I'll answer your questions right away. I mean, it's mostly been Prelude up to this point, but hey, it is what it is. But yeah, so I was rooting for the Oilers. They got knocked in the first round, but I've been really kind of rooting for the underdogs, and that's the Habs. To be honest, I think that's kind of where I'm sitting. I'm actually really, really excited. I think that line with Toffoli, Caulfield, and who else? I think it's Suzuki on that line. That's a pretty interesting line. Not gonna lie. Like I'm actually really excited to see what they do in against Tampa. I mean, a lot of people just really just wrote them off at the beginning, and they say they don't deserve to be there. It's junk. It's stupid. But I'm actually really, really, really excited to see what they can do as a team. I mean, they've come together great. Ironically, whenever I watch them, I think of it as like old, washed-up star power and a couple of like young guns. That's my personal opinion on what's going on right there. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think, you got a lot of depth and veteran depth and people that have been experienced in good cup runs on that team. So it's like, for me, I think of it and I'm like, you know what? Maybe not half bad. Obviously, Tampa, like realistically, everybody's like, oh, Tampa in 5, Tampa in 4. I don't know. I mean, like the fact that they were able to knock Vegas off in 6, that says something. Obviously, Vegas's entire forwards core was snake bitten. They couldn't score to save their lives. Their power play was abysmal. In fact, it felt like Montreal could get more offensive ability or offensive chances on the penalty kill than they were getting at even strength, which is really just bizarre in my opinion. But I don't know. Like it was pretty weird against the Golden Knights, and they killed almost 30 consecutive penalties. If you cannot score on a power play and with that amount of gifts, like you're not going to win a series. I guess obviously, realistically, Fleury's blunder. Fleury, when he came in and basically gifted the Montreal Canadiens like a goal to send them to overtime, and then they lost. Vegas lost. That was I literally thought, I was like, oh, this game's done. Vegas got in the bag. They're done. Nope, Fleury pulls that and then just misplays it, and then it's in the back of the net. I think Josh Anderson scored that goal. But I mean, obviously, hockey's hockey. Anything can happen. I'm full on expecting that Tampa just blows them out of the water and lights them up. But at the same time, I mean, they went toe to toe with New York, and New York, New York Islanders, obviously, and it was a really good series, impressive series. Like Game 7, obviously everybody's complain about the cap and the cap issues and all that other stuff. I don't really know what to think. I mean, yes, it's a loophole. Is it kind of greasy? Yeah, I definitely agree. Should it be there? No, I think there should be something about it. But everybody's like, oh, well, it happened before. There were other issues. There was this, there was that. And I'm like, okay, I mean, yeah, I guess. But it's like, my opinion is like, just because something happened in the past doesn't make it right? And like at the same time, we shouldn't judge people for the, like, people are like, oh, well, one of my buddies, he was talking to me, he's razzing me. He'll probably watch this and be like, I didn't mean that. But he was telling me that like Detroit won a lot of the cups in a pre-salary cap era. And I'm like, yeah, so we can't, in my opinion, this is the biggest thing. This applies to everyday life. And I know I'm gonna catch a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say this. We should not hold people accountable for the things that happened. Like, if something happened many years ago, we can't change the outcome in like a direct sense now, we shouldn't hold them accountable to today's standards, right? If there was a salary cap now, like I said, there's a salary cap introduced, I can't remember what it was, but I can't hold teams that previous to the salary cap, I can't say, I mean, like, oh, well, that doesn't count because they weren't salary cap compliant. I'm like, yo, dude, these things didn't exist till this time period. Like, you can't hold things accountable when these rules weren't existent. Same thing with like literally everything in life. We can't go back, and I would especially say the sins of the past, the bad things that happened in the past. I mean, I don't want to talk about really social issues, but I wouldn't say like you can't hold people accountable like that something happened like, hundreds of years to this exact same standard that we have today, because the standards weren't the same. Should we know? I think we should learn from the past. Personally, I think we should be like, yeah, that was bad idea. We shouldn't do that. Learn from the past and move forward. But when people are talking about like the salary cap and, Tampa Bay being 19 over the salary cap, I'm like, yeah, they exploited it. Yeah, the GM was smart. Mind you, I think Yzerman should take all the credit for these last two cups because he built a super team, and then just like, I mean, I'm personally happy to have Stevie Y home in Detroit, but dude honestly deserves the cup. Okay, like he does. Will his core that he's trying to operate with in Detroit win a cup? No, they're garbage. They're dumpster fire. But overall, it's not the worst thing on planet Earth. That's just my opinion. Like, I mean, they'll get better. They'll draft better. I mean, great development. But like, I can't fault, or I can't get angry per se that Tampa has kind of abused this. I can think it's stupid. I can be like, wow, they don't really deserve it. In reality, they don't. People are like, oh, well, they were over a little bit. Like other teams were over a little bit. I'm like, $3 million is like a bit. $5 million, it's like quite a bit, yeah. But like $19 million over the cap, or what, 17 or 19 million? That's a lot. Like, I'm just saying, 19 million. McDavid's contract is less than 19 million. The best player, one of the highest players in the league, does not make 19 million in a year. It makes like what, 10.5 or something like that? 12 million? I don't know. Can't remember. But like, if you're saying, like, think about the players that you could sign on $19 million for 1 year. I mean, the contracts aside, but like, that's a lot that they had because, Kucherov was sitting out. Kucherov was Stamkos? Yeah, whatever. But anyways, I mean, yeah, they might. And I think personally, in my opinion, to reduce this from happening in the long run, like another time, I think that you should have a minimum amount of games played. That's just my personal opinion. Like, I don't think you should be eligible to play in the playoffs if you do not play at least one single regular season game. And then if they play in the one regular single season game, like a portion of the cap would probably count. That the salary would probably count to the cap, whatever else. These other things, right? I don't think you should like basically sideline these people, and this is what a lot of people are claiming. It's like Kucherov and all these other people are looking great coming back into the dressing room, in the first game looking great, like nothing had even phased them when they come off an injury. Now, obviously, I think that were they smart? Yeah, I think it's just a very fortunate circumstance in a sense how it worked out for the team. But honestly, I'm looking forward to it. I really want Montreal to win. That's my opinion. Do I think they'll win? You know what? No. I think they will win. I personally think they will win. But most likely, like the gut feeling is Montreal will win. The logic part of me says no, Tampa's going to like completely clean house with them. But my gut feeling in my heart says Montreal's going to win. The Cup's going to come back to Canada, and I would say you heard it here first, but probably a bunch of other people have said it first. So that's my opinion. You can take it as you want. You can tell me I'm terrible. You can tell me I'm wrong. But yeah. Anyways, there are no questions on this. Sorry, bounce that thing. If there are no questions, I am going to probably leave this off here because I've been talking now for about an hour and 15 minutes, which means that I will. I know I've been behind, so a little bit of a PSA, right? I know I've been behind with the upload schedule, which is a little bit my fault. I've been a little bit busy with the end of school, trying to. I mean, obviously, I guess you guys didn't know I was shard of metal that was stuck in my eye. I remember I talked about it in my last live stream. I've been going back and forth for treatment, trying to get it, the residue out, which has been kind of a bit of a pain in the butt. But so it's kind of chewed up a lot of my time. There's been other things that I've had to deal with, trying to get stuff ready. Summer. But yeah, I do want to kind of go back to you making one video a week and then having a live stream on a Sunday where you guys can ask your questions. I don't mind just kind of sitting here hanging out for a little bit. Yeah, whatever you want to ask, you ask. But yeah, that's kind of the thing is. So I will try and get back to that. I will try and make a video coming up this week. But I do thank you guys every single time you watch the video, every single time you tune in. It's awesome. I thank you so much for, all the time support. I mean, obviously like the video. Obviously, subscribe to see more awesome stuff in the future. I mean, every single sub counts. Every single person that comes and watches the video, every single view counts to me. And I think it's great. At the end of the day, I never even thought I'd get, maybe 100 subscribers, let alone even like what I have, like 400 or no, it's not 400. Sorry, I have like 300 something now, which is I mean, I'm hoping to get to maybe 500 by the end of the year. Who knows? But that's kind of my goal. But anyways, thank you so much for all the support. Everything you guys do. You guys are the reason why I'm doing this. Obviously, I don't just do it just for wasting time. But anyways, thank you very much. I'll leave it off here. And obviously, if you have any questions, the Instagram is always open. I will put that. Actually, I should put that in there for you guys. If you do want to ask any questions there and you have questions, I do not mind doing that. Usually, I start making announcements usually about Thursday, Friday night, and that's when I start kind of for the live stream. And I have a question box. Put that there. You ask your questions. It's in there. And I can get them up here for you guys. Thank you so much for you guys who did contribute and did ask a lot of questions, which is great, especially Prelude-related questions. I don't mind answering them again, although I don't really want to answer them like 50 times. But anyways, I don't have a problem. Oh, hey, I'm literally just signing off here. But if you have any questions, make sure to ask it. Otherwise, I will be popping off here in about a minute or so. But yeah, as I said, kind of just a little bit of an update. When I go traveling this summer, got an EF hatch that's hanging idle and stalls. Oh, sorry. Okay. Guess we got another question. Okay, I'll answer this one. Okay, rolling loose next. Okay, I got an EF hatch that hanging idle and stalls when you push the clutch in. Just changed coolant. How's your idle air control valve? And your fast idle valve? I don't know if it does the EF have that fast idle valve? I don't know if it does. Oh, you cleaned it 10 times? Let's see. A91.5. You clean the idle air control valve. How is your master cylinder and your slave cylinder? How are they? That's what I would ask. I don't know how they're operating. Clutch is very light. I wonder if there's like a resistance in it. I haven't checked the slave and master. Yeah, there could be potentially things in that. I'm trying to think. You know what? Here, let me do a quick little search on this while I'm doing this, and I can kind of try and entertain you guys. Okay, well, based on a thread on Honda Tech, they're saying a lot of like, I don't know what your O2 sensor is. Do you wait? Well, master and slave cylinder could be something. What about your O2 sensor? How's your O2 sensor doing? Are you throwing any codes for that? Because you'd be running off of the one. Yeah. I've been live for about an hour and 20 minutes now. I was literally just about to end it off, but now it's like more people are on here than when I was actually doing it. Never changed it to no codes. Interesting. Okay. I'm trying to think what really affects idle. Does the EF have a fast idle valve? Because I know with the Prelude, so we had a lot of issues with bouncing idles due to the fast idle valve, and where the idle, like the set screw is set, like if it's set too low, when you press the clutch in, or when you try and do something, it'll mess up on you, and you can kind of potentially stall the car out. Like if your idle is set too low, like what's your idle speed at? What's your what is it? What's your idle? Your RPMs at usually is about 800, or is it lower? Because if it's lower, then might be a problem. No RPM gauge. That would that's a little bit problematic. Okay, so when you start the car, start slow, you push the gas and hangs on the high idle. Okay. Do you have a fast idle valve though? Let me check. I'm gonna check this. Does the EF? I can spell properly. Okay, high idle. Yeah, the fast idle. It's called the fast idle thermal valve. And that'll be your idle speed adjustment. Okay, go to the end of the alley, put in neutral, tries to stall. Start slow, push gas, hangs on the high handle. Okay, go to the end of the alley, put in neutral, tries to stall. And then you say chokes to get going again. I'm honestly wondering. I honestly wonder what your fast idle valve is set at. That's my opinion. I wonder what it is. Or like what your idle set screw is at. Because if you're idling too low, then it'll be very, very easy for it to stall out. That's just my opinion. I mean, the biggest problem with like idle issues or like idling issues is that if I'm not actually there, it's a little bit hard for me. Bubbling, yeah. Oh, okay. So I know the prelude in the case. So you say, do you think the air in the coolant would do this? You said you've already bled the coolant. Coolant usually with Hondas particularly, and the Prelude, because the Prelude's notorious for this, is a bouncy idle. So when you go and sit at a stoplight, ran it for 20 minutes, bleeding coolant. Okay, yeah. So when you go and sit at a stoplight, if you have air bubbles in the coolant, or it's the it could be the fast idle valve as well. Usually fast idle valve with these things. Air in the coolant will usually give you a bouncy idle. So it'll bounce up. So you'll be sitting at a stoplight, it'll go vroom, boom, vroom, boom, vroom, boom. So I'll do that over and over and over again. as it's just really funky, like, or really funky, sorry, and really weird. But yeah, Kimmy, cool, like bubbles in the coolant can do that. I wouldn't really have it like necessarily stall out. Or you're looking at the fast idle valve. I would check fast idle valve, and I would also check like the idle set screw, which is if I remember on the what are they? Yeah, there is I know. Okay, so throttle the map sensors there. Non FTIV. So there's a different one. I'll send you an image. This one is of a Type R spoon throttle body, whatever. Copy image, or actually no. I'll just send you a direct. Yeah, here we go. So that's a picture. If you look at that picture and you go to, you say there's the idle adjustment screw. This one is on it should be very similar. I'm not entirely certain which one. And then it says the coolant lines can be bypassed if desired, non-FTIV, so fast idle valve equipped. So then there's the fast idle. Oh boy, okay. Where is it? Okay, so I'm gonna try and get you a picture here that has it. And generally speaking, this is on an Integra. So it's at the bottom here. And I'll put this as a link here for you. There. Okay, you said it's got the weird carb type intake, but it's fuel injected. I personally haven't seen that then. But so this one, if you look at that image, that circled part. So if you can see at the top, there is that there's this screw adjustment. You got your butterfly, your valve for your throttle body, or the plate. Sorry. Then at that circle part, that's your fast idle valve, and you just like there's a little cap thing that like basically unscrews. Here's a good example. Let's get this thing. Okay. So if I look at this picture, there we go. So this one has the fast idle valve, and you basically take this like beeswax, whatever ring or thing it is, and you basically just kind of screw it back in, usually if there's any issues with that. But yeah, that's all the idle issues that were on the Prelude. Any of the Preludes were solved with either the fast idle valve. I had a lot of issues when I was doing my swap with the idling to get to idle, and that was usually like the idle set screw. And then once I was running on the, proper ECU and not proper ECU, but the proper tune, and making sure that the idle was actually set properly, then it was fine. Third image looks right. Okay, all right. Yeah. So the idle screw on that one is there, and you can just set that using like a flathead screwdriver or standard screwdriver. You can just kind of spin it around. Usually it'll back out on itself, and it really shouldn't, and that can cause a bunch of idle issues. But usually it's a bouncing idle. If not, I would check whatever your set screw is, your idle set screw, like on the other image I sent. in the chat, and that's where you would look at it in there. And I would kind of play around with that. I'm assuming you're messing around with the thing right now, which is probably not the most fun. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Hopefully that works for you. But I think I'm going to cut it off there though, because now I'm at this for about an hour and a half. Anyways, okay. One more question, and then we can end off. What's the question? What do we got? Shoot. Say the question. It's probably an entertaining one, hopefully. Check. Ooh, fun. Ooh. Okay. One more question. Me running a chipped 06. I'm assuming you mean a chipped P06, right? P06 on a 3rd gen Prelude H22 swap. On a P13 base map, do I need to get it dyno tuned? It's running really, really rich. Okay. Okay. Let me repeat that so I figure out what's kind of going on here. So you say you're running a chipped P06 on a 3rd gen H22. You're on that chip P06, you're running a P13 base map. And should you get it dyno tuned, it's running really rich. My question is, which H22 are you running? Are you running the A1 or the A4? The H22A JDM. Okay. So I remember there was a big issue with the fuel injectors that I had, that I was running when I had my F20B, because I ended up running the, and they kind of were really funky with how they operated. You could get them to work, but the difference between the peak and hold injectors versus like the other kind. So basically your H22, your OBD1, H22A1 injectors are different than your H22 injectors, and they have different CC and different fittings and all these other things, right? So you could check the fuel maps on the difference between whatever your H22A is, your JDM one, and whatever your P13 base map is, right? Because, okay, so you wired in a resistor box. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, like, I mean, when I was running my F20B, originally what I did to get it to run it back home, and for a little bit, I was running it on an actual P13 ECU. Would I recommend doing that? No, because it ran like crap. It ran rich and it bogged the car out, right? But I would suggest getting a tuner to look at or find which JDM H22A JDM engine you have, and figuring out which P13 base map, because most likely your P13 base map that you're running is probably a generic P13. Like if it was for an H22A1 versus a JDM H22, right? So I would try and get a base map that is as close to whatever the actual engine that you're using or running, and then go from there. Getting a dyno tune would be probably your best bet in terms of like horsepower and that aspect. But I mean, other than that, I would just because you're probably just running off the shelf like a chip, like kind of off the shelf tune, right? That you're getting these base maps probably burned onto the chips, right? Or did you get a tuner to basically load a base map on? Which one was it? Because there'd be a difference, right? Oh, your tuner did it. Okay. Would the base map run the car so it's drivable? Coming from somebody who ran an F20B with a P13 base map or P13 ECU, yes, it's drivable. So it ran his car, though, ran an emulator fine, idled anyway. I don't know. I don't know if it would be that. if whatever your idle was set at in the vehicle. I don't know if it's miscommunicating with something. The thing is, computers are a little funky every single day, right? But my big thing would be like I ran my Prelude with a P13 ECU for about a year. I don't want to know what it did to the engine. It was crap. It bogged it out. I drove it because I didn't have someone who could tune it properly, and I just drove it. I wasn't stepping on it. I didn't abuse the car. I don't really abuse the car anyways. I like maybe engage Vtec once every like couple of days if I'm driving it, if that. But did you have the EGR blocked when you ran that? Ooh, I'd have to. Let me take a look at the. I'd have to look at what that. I can't know. I believe that I don't think I have it hooked up. Either I have it blocked off or I don't think I have it hooked up. Yeah, I don't believe I have the EGR valve hooked up. Yeah, you have unnecessary backline swap. Yeah, because I don't believe I have the EGR valve blocked off, or hooked up. I don't think I think did I block it off or did I remove it? I can't remember. Actually I think it's just there sitting there. I'd have to look in the bay. It's been a little bit of a while since I've went over every single thing. Did the car throw EGR codes at all? No. It didn't do anything funky like that. The only code I was getting, like before I started getting everything kind of put properly, it didn't really have, wasn't throwing any codes like that. Originally when we first swapped in, I did throw a couple codes. But no EGR codes. I didn't have anything like that. But that was on my swap, which was an F20B, which technically should be running quite a bit differently than an H22. It basically wouldn't deliver power up high end, and basically it was like it bogged out mid range, and it was giving it way too much fuel. That's kind of what happened. My idling was it idled normally almost. I didn't have any idle issues. Then again, I did make a block off plate on my idle air control valve out of a can of Nestea. Ghetto to the max, but it works for now, anyways. But no EG codes. Did you use another map sensor, and did you have to change the wires around at all? Yes, I did use a different map sensor. It was wired in. I wasn't able to use that one. I had to use a different map sensor, and I would have to check which wires were wired where. Wait. What code? Wait. Okay, hold up. It says, why are you running? Okay, what? Okay, well, you asked, what do you think of a 2JZ and a 3rd gen Prelude? Is it okay? First of all, is that like a serious question, or is that like just a goof off question? Because seriously, I mean, I guess, but it's a it's a front engine front wheel drive car. That the 2JZ is a front engine rear wheel drive car, so you'd have to create a powertrain to the rear wheels, which we don't really have at that point. I mean, I guess if you want, I mean, it kind of be cool. I don't think I personally don't think the deck height of the engine would probably fit. But yeah, you need a lot of money. I'm not talking like a little bit of money. I'm talking like a lot of money. I'm talking like 30. I'm thinking 30 grand to do that one at least. I think that there's not really much of a point in doing that, to be honest. I mean, it could be cool, but I think that, yeah, because the length of the engine, it's obviously a 6-cylinder, right? I mean, for me, it's just the engine it'd be too long per se and tall to really fit in the bay. And you could probably make it work, but I don't really think there's room for it. Maybe an F20C because it's a 4-cylinder, but even then, The hood line slopes so low, like it slopes, right? So you're trying to stick an engine that will sit out farther, right? Rather than, because when the original one, they designed it and canted it back by about 18 degrees. So I don't think you're gonna have to cut a hole in the hood. You're gonna have piss poor ground clearance. You're gonna have to deal with trying to convert it to rear wheel drive. I don't know. I think that'd be, I personally don't think that would be a good idea. I mean, if you want to, go ahead. Your money. End of the day, your money. Go ahead. Do whatever you want. Money, right? Mr. Krabs. That's what I would say. Just do whatever you want. You want to burn the money? But most people that I know wouldn't drop 30 grand to try and do that. That's my estimate, about $30,000. And even then, I don't know. I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't do it. There's just more capable platforms at that point. I think that I just think that it's a great car. It's a great chassis, but I wouldn't try to convert it rear wheel drive. I'd probably try and do a mid-engine rear wheel drive conversion before I did a front engine rear wheel drive conversion. Just doesn't have the setup for it. They tried to literally make it look like a mid-engine car with it being front wheel. Yeah. The biggest thing was the tilt. Sorry, back to Rolling the Losing Die. It says the stock map sensor runs my car different on the P13. I can get it to rev up high, and different one would idle good and choke when revving. Okay, I don't know which map sensors you have. That's the biggest thing, right? I don't know which exact map sensor you have on there, but I would try to when I did mine, I had to wire it in. I couldn't use I had to use an H22A1 map sensor. I remember that, but I guess it's the big thing is right now, all my things are coming out, and it's so you're saying that was 5 years ago at this point. Okay. Yeah, the H22 barely fits closing the hood. Yep, it barely does. On the ribbing, on the structural ribbing on the underside of the hood, dependent on which, your valve cover or whatever, it will actually rub on the underside of the hood. Just happens. And you get piss poor ground clearance too. But it's such as life. It's fun. Okay, so you said it runs the best with the stock Prelude Denso sensor. Which, you're talking the 3rd gen Prelude one or the 4th, like the SRV, or sorry, not the SRV, but the H22 one? Which one? Which map sensor are we talking? Stock one or the stock one from the new engine? The 91 aside. Strange. I use the other one. I'd have to. I don't know. I would start adjusting things because you're talking. Yeah, I don't know. I would check your. I don't know. I would check. I would have your tuner check your fuel, really. Because if it's running rich, I would check what your base map is and setting it for fuel. That's personally my opinion. And if, so long as you have an AFR gauge or the tuner knows what he's doing well enough, you could probably get a good enough tweak to it to make it run perfectly fine. That's my opinion. I know that with what I'm running, can you do that from Chrome? I'm not 100% certain if you can do that from Chrome. I would have to check with my guy, who my tuner. Yeah. So here's the thing. Basically, what happened was, So what we did was we had a programmable chip, right? We put it into, and this is Compu's computer service. The guy's like a master's in physics and does engineering as his job. Brilliant dude. But what we were doing is we were testing out different ROMs, right? And so we would burn them onto this programmable chip. And then what we do is we try to find the best match for it based off of the H22, because they didn't have an F20B ROM that we could burn onto the chip, right? And so then what we did after that, we found a couple that were close, ish to what we were thinking. Kind of ran it in the car, was testing the AFR, and then afterwards we were like, okay, well, this is kind of where we were going with this. And once we found the best one, we actually didn't end up using an H22 tune because it ran it way too rich. We actually ended up using a JDM B18C Type R tune. And so then at that point, once we realized, we were like, hey, it runs a little bit lean in this section, runs a little bit and so we were tweaking the fuel throughout it so that it would run, the proper AFR throughout the entire range, right? And I've been running that for about just over 4 years now. And it's been perfectly fine. Haven't had an issue with it. But that's what I've been doing. So yeah, I would just, I mean, you pay tuners quite a bit of money, or people that know their ECUs for a reason, right? And this guy that I have up in here in Edmonton, he's a really good guy. So I trust his work. He's done great work for me. He's done great work for the community. So that's what I do. I go to them. They're the masters with the computers, not me. I'm not that great with them. I just do what they tell me to do. Hold the wrench. Or well, not really. I guess it's, I remember when he opened up my ECU and he was talking about all the stuff he was going to replace, and like his base, and he's like, oh yeah, these little, like these, and desoldering it and like taking all these other things out and all the components, and I'm just like, whoa, mind blown. There's a lot of stuff in there. But I mean, obviously, the stuff in the ECU is going to wear out after, a couple of years, heat exposure, stuff like that. It's the same reason why quartz watches don't last as long as they do. I mean, like over time, these quartz watches, the quartz technology, the circuit boards and everything, them are going to wear out, right? So your capacitors and everything else are going to fail on you. But anyways, any last minute questions before I cut it off here? I think we're almost at hour and 45 minutes, a lot. Any other questions? No, nothing? Do I believe in Bigfoot? Didn't you ask that last time? I think I said maybe. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. But, I mean, I'll tell you this. I believe that there are like Yetis, if that makes sense. Like, that there's a Yeti. Like a Bigfoot like Yeti. Like a huge mountainous snow ape. Yeah, could potentially be here. But not Bigfoot. Like, I don't know. Like, not like the Sasquatch or the Bigfoot. I mean, like, maybe. Like, if it's like, I guess I don't really have a problem in believing it. If it's like some sort of like being similar to like a Yeti or like a big giant snow ape, but just over here in Canada. I don't have a problem with that. I kind of like to think some of those cool mythical creatures are alive, but who knows? I don't know. Can it be killed? I think almost anything can be killed. It's my opinion. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Probably. I would assume so. If they can find it, they can kill it. My opinion. Teleporting Bigfoot. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know, man. I think we better cut it off there though before we get into really weird stuff. But anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. I guess it's been a long episode. But anyways, thanks again. Take care. You guys have a fantastic day. See you guys later.